Ever wondered how the Amish manage to stretch every dollar on groceries while keeping their tables full of comforting, homemade dishes? In this video, we'll dive into the lesser-known tips and tricks they use to cut expenses, reduce waste, and make the most of every meal. From clever storage hacks to communal methods of meal prep, these practices have stood the test of time for good reason. Get ready to discover how a simpler, more self-sufficient approach can transform your kitchen and boost your budget, all without giving up the flavors and traditions that make cooking such a satisfying part of everyday life. Number 1. Root cellaring. Many Amish families rely on underground or partially underground spaces to store their harvest for months, keeping foods like potatoes, carrots, apples, and beets fresh without expensive refrigeration. These cellars often have walls lined with stone or concrete to stabilize temperature and humidity, a method that's been documented in off-grid living articles as both cost-effective and eco-friendly. This setup prevents produce from spoiling quickly, reducing the need to buy groceries out of season. In some Amish communities, people build vent systems using simple ductwork to let cold air flow during winter, so the cellar rarely fluctuates in temperature. By monitoring humidity with a basic meter, they can adjust ventilation or add pans of water if the air gets too dry. When you read blog posts about root cellars, they usually highlight that the key is organization. Vegetables that require similar temperatures and moisture levels go together, while others are separated. On YouTube, homesteaders show how you can replicate a smaller version of this by using a corner of a basement, or even burying a large container in the yard. Root cellaring not only saves money on electric bills, but also cuts down on food waste, because produce retains its quality much longer. Some Amish families keep separate compartments or shelves for each type of fruit or vegetable, and they cycle out the older items first to avoid spoilage. This system encourages a more sustainable way of living, as you're not constantly trucking produce in from distant suppliers and you're taking advantage of natural cooling rather than modern appliances. Number 2. Homemade cleaning supplies. Another surprising way to save money, inspired by Amish traditions, is crafting your own cleaning products from simple ingredients like vinegar, baking soda, and water. Many Amish households find it unnecessary to purchase commercial detergents for kitchen surfaces or floors. Some even create laundry soap from grated bar soap and washing soda. Online articles that analyze frugal living often mention this practice because it slashes grocery bills while reducing plastic waste. In an Amish kitchen, you might see glass bottles filled with these homemade mixtures labeled by hand. They often prefer unscented soaps or natural essential oils to keep harsh chemicals out of the house. When it's time to mop the floor or wipe counters, a splash of vinegar or a sprinkle of baking soda can go a long way, especially if you let it sit for a minute before scrubbing. According to tutorials shared in off-grid communities, you can also make wood polish by mixing olive oil and lemon juice, which the Amish sometimes utilize for their handcrafted furniture. These steps not only reduce environmental impact, but also enhance the family budget by cutting out high-priced store-bought cleaners. The best part is how flexible these recipes can be. If you run out of one ingredient, you can usually substitute another without losing cleaning power. This form of self-reliance is a cornerstone of Amish culture and can be adapted to modern urban life with minimal effort. Number 3. Sourdough and fermentation. Amish homemakers often cultivate sourdough starters that can last for generations if cared for correctly. The principle behind this tradition is straightforward. Harness wild yeast from the air to leaven bread, eliminating the continual need for commercial yeast. Articles discussing Amish baking explain that sourdough creates a depth of flavor and texture you can't always get with store-bought yeast. Some Amish families also ferment vegetables like cabbage into sauerkraut or cucumbers into pickles to extend shelf life naturally without expensive equipment. These fermented foods tend to be rich in probiotics and beneficial bacteria, which many people value for digestive health. By practicing fermentation, the Amish reduce dependence on store-bought condiments that might include artificial preservatives. Instead, they rely on simple ingredients like salt and fresh produce. YouTubers exploring Amish homesteads often highlight open crocks full of fermenting cabbage in the corner of a warm kitchen, covered loosely with cloth to allow gas exchange. These channels emphasize how fermentation can be done even in small apartments, as all you need is a clean jar and consistent monitoring. The cost savings come from needing fewer pantry staples because a single batch of sauerkraut or pickles can last months if stored properly. Plus, sourdough bread and fermented foods typically have a longer shelf life than their non-fermented counterparts, so you throw away less. The process might feel unfamiliar at first, but once you grasp it, you'll see how it contributes to a no-waste mindset. Number 4. Maple syrup and local sweeteners. Many Amish communities, especially in regions with maple trees, produce their own syrup rather than relying on refined sugar from the store. This tradition involves tapping trees in late winter or early spring, boiling down the sap, and bottling the syrup in reusable containers. Local articles about Amish life point out that families sometimes pool their resources, sharing equipment like evaporator pans and giant cast iron pots. By sourcing sweeteners locally, they reduce packaging waste and develop a more direct relationship with nature's seasonal rhythms. Maple syrup can be used in everything from pancakes to baked beans, cutting down on store-bought sugar. In some areas, if maple trees aren't abundant, the Amish might rely on honey from beekeeping. Bees help pollinate gardens, so it's a double benefit for a community that relies heavily on homegrown produce. This approach fosters biodiversity and lowers reliance on trucked-in sweeteners. Many off-grid enthusiasts have written about how maple syrup or honey can be less processed than typical white sugar, often giving dishes a richer taste. The cost savings aren't always immediate because you need to invest time in tapping trees or maintaining beehives. However, over the course of a year, families notice that they spend far less on commercial sweeteners. They also frequently exchange jars of honey or bottles of syrup within their community, reinforcing that spirit of cooperation and ensuring everyone has enough to last until the next tapping or honey harvest. Number 5. Homemade butter and dairy. Churning butter at home might sound old-fashioned, but in many Amish kitchens, it's a weekly ritual that helps them avoid the markup on store-bought dairy products. If a family keeps a milk cow, they'll skim off the cream and churn it into butter, either by hand in a churn or with a simple mechanical device. Articles that delve into Amish farm life show how leftover buttermilk from this process can be used for biscuits or pancakes, ensuring that nearly nothing goes to waste. YouTube videos about Amish dairy techniques often reveal that families also make cottage cheese or yogurt, especially during months when the cow or goats are producing more milk than they can drink. The cost savings accumulate quickly because the same gallon of milk can yield multiple dairy products. Some Amish households also engage in cheese making, using rennet and cheesecloth to separate curds from whey. The whey then goes into livestock feed, or into recipes calling for liquid, again aiming to use every part of the resource. While not everyone can keep a cow in their backyard, smaller-scale versions of these processes can be done with store-bought cream or milk. The key insight is to see dairy as a versatile ingredient that can take multiple forms, thereby reducing the chance that it'll expire before you can use it. This holistic approach to dairy is part of the Amish ethos of self-reliance and stewardship, reinforcing how each component of the milk can serve a purpose in the kitchen. Number 6. Dehydrating foods. Drying fruits and vegetables is another long-standing Amish technique, making it easier to preserve what can't be eaten fresh or canned right away. People who've visited Amish markets often see large bags of dried apples, peaches, peppers, and even zucchini chips. Dehydration shrinks produce, so you save space in your pantry, and you don't need to rely on refrigeration or freezers. Off-grid living blogs mention that Amish families might use solar dehydrators on sunny days, laying out trays of sliced fruits or vegetables covered with mesh to keep bugs away. Others use wood-fired ovens with the door cracked open so that warm air can circulate without cooking the food. The dried items last for months if stored in airtight containers, providing quick snack options or ingredients for winter soups. When you look at modern homesteading channels, you'll find tutorials on how to dehydrate a variety of produce, from tomatoes to bananas, with minimal equipment. These channels point out that dehydrated fruits can be rehydrated for pies or oatmeal, and dried herbs can flavor all kinds of dishes. This method saves money by preventing the need to toss out produce that might not get used right away. The Amish might also grind dried corn into cornmeal, or even keep dried beans ready for long-term storage. By adopting a simple dehydrator, commercially made or homemade, you can replicate this practice. It's a fairly low-energy solution, and once you learn the basic process, you can adapt it to your local climate and available produce. Number 7. Spice blends and seasoning mixes. Rather than buying single-use packets for taco seasoning or marinades, Amish cooks often maintain a shelf of basic spices and herbs, blending them to create their own customized mixes. Articles written about frugal grocery strategies explain that those small packets at the store can be more expensive per ounce and often contain extra fillers. In Amish communities, you might find jars labeled for steak rub, poultry seasoning, or soup base, all mixed from a handful of commonly used spices like salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, and so on. This approach not only reduces costs but also ensures that every seasoning is fresh because the cook can control the batch size. YouTubers who explore Amish kitchens sometimes showcase big bowls of spices being measured out in large batches, ready to be divided into smaller containers. Any leftover mix is carefully stored in labeled jars, preventing waste. The added bonus is that you can tailor each blend to your family's taste, whether you prefer a smokier flavor or a hint of sweetness. Articles on spice storage suggest keeping these mixes in cool, dark areas to preserve potency longer, another Amish-inspired practice for maximizing shelf life. Creating seasoning blends at home also means fewer plastic packets or little jars piling up, which fits perfectly with a low-waste mindset. By reusing glass containers for your mixes, you limit the amount of new packaging entering your home and ultimately cut down on unnecessary spending in the spice aisle. Number 8. Using wood stoves efficiently. While many Amish communities opt to live off the grid, they still manage to cook efficiently by scheduling meals around the heat from their wood stoves. In colder months, the stove does double duty. It warms the house and cooks the meals. Articles on Amish homesteading note that early in the morning, someone starts the fire, and once the stove reaches the right temperature, the entire cooking process for breakfast is underway. Any excess heat can be used to simmer soup or bake bread for lunchtime. By afternoon, the stove may still be warm enough to keep a pot of water hot for tea or dishwashing. This minimizes the need for separate water heaters or electric ovens. Some families plan their baking day when they know the stove will be running for a long time anyway. On homesteading channels, you might see how Amish homes incorporate features like oven thermometers and well-fitted stove lids to control temperatures precisely. Rather than letting any excess firewood go to waste, they'll keep an eye on the coals and adjust cooking times based on the heat level. This practice can inspire modern homeowners to consider more efficient use of their ovens or stovetops. For instance, you can schedule baking multiple dishes together rather than scattering them throughout the week. It's about harnessing the energy you've already generated. The overall goal is to reduce utility bills and maximize the resources at hand, which is a constant theme in Amish living. Number 9. Bartering and trading skills. Beyond the traditional idea of sharing food, the Amish often engage in trading labor and expertise, which indirectly reduces cooking-related costs. For instance, if one family is skilled at sausage making, they might offer that service in exchange for help with orchard pruning or garden planting from another family. Articles about Amish economics highlight how these reciprocal arrangements help cut down on professional fees and allow each community member to concentrate on what they do best. This informal economy can extend to cooking supplies as well. Someone who's good at making jam might trade jars for homemade bread or pastries. Modern discussions about bartering, especially on frugality forums, often cite the Amish as an example of how communities thrive on mutual support. YouTube videos focused on off-grid living show real-life examples of families coming together on a weekend to process large amounts of meat, dividing the final products among participants. That reduces the cost for each household and saves time by pooling manpower. This system not only fosters stronger social bonds, but also leads to less waste because everyone gets exactly what they can handle. If you translate this to an urban environment, bartering might mean trading your skill in repairing a neighbor's bicycle for some homemade meals, or swapping a batch of homemade cookies for a friend's help with gardening tasks. It's all about stretching resources further than you could alone and making sure items or skills don't go unused. Number 10. Equipment maintenance and repairs. The Amish are well known for their ability to fix tools and kitchen equipment rather than discarding them at the first sign of trouble. Many families keep a small workshop where they can repair everything from cast iron cookware to a squeaky wooden dough bowl. In-depth articles on Amish frugality point out that a well-seasoned cast iron pan can last for generations if properly taken care of. By regularly oiling and cleaning these items, they avoid purchasing new cookware or appliances that would be costly in the long run. Even smaller gadgets like hand-cranked mixers or grinders receive periodic checkups to ensure they work smoothly. You might find references in online homesteading forums to Amish workshops that service old equipment for a fraction of what a new item would cost. Videos documenting Amish life sometimes highlight local craftspeople who specialize in everything from cookware restoration to stove refurbishment, keeping items out of landfills. This extends beyond the kitchen, too. If a barn door or fence is broken, Amish carpenters fix it with materials on hand, rather than rushing to the hardware store for brand new supplies. By embracing a repair-first mentality, they avoid constant replacements, thereby saving money and reducing waste. For those looking to adopt this habit, it might mean learning basic DIY skills such as changing a belt on a hand mixer or reseasoning a damaged skillet. Over time, this mindset transforms how you handle your belongings. Instead of replacing things at the first sign of wear, you invest a little effort in upkeep, preserving not only your bank balance but also your connection to the items you use daily.